Jack from Spread Book Joy suggested that I do this, the Confessions of a Kindle Hoarder tag. So I thought I would combine that with just chatting through my thoughts on my Kindle. Thanks, Jack. Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking all about my Kindles, and I tried to angle the camera so that you could see sweet little Harry sitting on my lap, and yeah, I hope you enjoy seeing him being so sweet. So let's get into Kindles. Actually, if you're new here, I'm Shelly. I love books and reading. I recently got a new puppy named Harry. I'm a mom of 2, and yeah, I like to talk about books and all things bookish. So let's get into Kindles. I was gifted my first Kindle, which is the Kindle Paperwhite, from my husband. Actually, my very first Kindle was a Kindle Fire, the one with the screen on it. And he bought that for me because I am a very tech resistant person, and he introduces me to all the new tech, including my iPhone and my smartphone and the Kindle Fire and so on and so forth. And so he bought me a Kindle Fire because he wanted me to have a tablet of sorts and thought I would really enjoy it. And it's true, I did really enjoy it. However, when he bought himself the Kindle Oasis, which is this one, when he bought the Kindle Oasis, I decided to swap out my Kindle Fire for his old Kindle Paperwhite. And I'm so glad that I did. I enjoyed the Kindle Fire, but I didn't love the screen. I love the screen on the Kindle Paperwhite and the Kindle Oasis. It's the most paper-like. And I'm just going to start my discussion from there. I'm not going to really talk about my Kindle Fire. So the Kindle Paperwhite, let's see, why was I resistant to the Kindle? I really had this burning belief that reading was best in paper form, from a bound book that you can touch and feel, and so on and so forth. My mind really changed when I had my second son and I was reading from my Kindle Paperwhite. So I was a new mom of 2, of my second son, and I was learning that as a mom, it's really good to take a step back, to settle down and really enjoy just holding your baby, rocking your baby, snuggling with your baby. And often I did that while I was reading. And at the time I read A Little Life. I remember I had 7 weeks off from graduate school in between semesters. My son was born the day I finished, so I turned in my last paper for my first semester of graduate school. The next day I had my son, and so for 7 weeks it was just total bliss between me and my little boy, and I read. And in that time I read A Little Life by Hanya, Yanagihara. And what was great was that it was a thick, chunky book that was very immersive. And so as I snuggled my new little baby in the dark, in the quiet, I could turn on my Kindle and not have to worry about spit up on the Kindle or milk or dirty diapers or sticky hands. I could easily wipe it off, and it was like a new mother's dream. I mean, it was really, really wonderful. I could read it one-handed. I didn't have to worry about losing my place, anything like that. So I really converted to being a Kindle lover, but I have a mixed relationship with the Kindle. So I'm going to talk about some cons. One of the cons is that my library doesn't have a service where you can send a PDF to your Kindle. I actually haven't figured out quite how to send a PDF to my Kindle, and I'm not really looking to figure out how to do that. That means that because of my unwillingness to figure out how to send a PDF to my Kindle, it means that I purchase all of the books that I read, and I purchase from Amazon, which I have mixed feelings about Amazon. They're not super strong either way. I can see the pros and I can see the major cons of Amazon. And that means that Amazon controls all of the prices. It means that I won't stumble across a book for $1. Sometimes they have sales. but it means that all of the pricing and all of the availability of my reading on my Kindle is really controlled by Amazon. And I have mixed feelings about that as a consumer, as somebody who likes to not give all of my money to Amazon. I just have mixed feelings. Again, I'm not, this isn't a moralizing deal. It's more just like, if Amazon says a book is $25, then I'm not gonna get it anywhere else for cheaper, and I'm not gonna seek it out, and that's the price I'm gonna pay because Amazon controls it. So that's really my biggest con. My other con is that I had heard on a podcast once while I was in graduate school about reading and reading comprehension, and it's the speaker, who I can't remember now, but it stuck with me because this was several years ago now. He said that our brains actually absorb slightly less than from Kindle reading than from a paper book. So he did most of his reading from paper books because it was better on his brain. And yet if he found that in some years, if the Kindle was somehow better on the brain, he would probably switch to Kindle reading because he was just all about doing what was best for his brain. So after I had heard that, I was like, yes, paper books all the way. But let's get into some pros because I'm leading right into that. Some of the pros is that sometimes I can't find the paper book, or sometimes the paper book is incredibly expensive. For example, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, my library didn't have it. They had it nowhere. And I didn't really want to buy a book copy because I had a feeling that I wanted to read it at night, and my nighttime reading is all on my Kindle. And so I found it for just a couple of dollars, and I was able to download it, and I read it right away, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed that experience. The second thing is that I read a couple minutes a night. The second pro on my list is that I read a couple minutes or for up to an hour at night, right before I go to sleep. And it's really wonderful. Gina talks about it as like this reading under the covers with a flashlight, that feeling of when you're a little kid and you're reading and all snuggled up under the covers. The Kindle gives that experience, but without the book to contend with, without the flashlight to contend with, and without a nightlight. And so often I'll read and then I don't even remember to turn my Kindle off. I just fall asleep where I'm at, and the Kindle shuts off by itself, and I don't have to worry about turning a light off or waking myself up again. I'm just sort of drowsily put myself to sleep through reading, which is a really delightful and wonderful and healthy habit that I have, and I really enjoy that habit. So yeah, so those are some of the pros and the cons. Pricing as a con, some of the pros being the experience and the accessibility, and just the enjoyment of the Kindle. So let's get into some of Julie's questions. So she said, be brave. How many books or slash samples do you currently have on your Kindle? I have 122, which is kind of a misnomer because my husband and I share the same account. He's downloaded and bought books that I've read and vice versa. Actually, I don't know if he's read any books that I've downloaded, but every book that I buy, because I buy at full price, I read right away. So she says, you know, yay or nay. Well, actually that's samples, but that's one thing about me is that if I buy a book on my Kindle, I almost always read it with the exception of one book, which was Karenina, and I started it while I was in between semesters in grad school, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to finish it before grad school started up again, and so I paused at a very good stopping point. It was after part 1, and then I never picked it up again. And it's not a DNF, it's not like a hard DNF, it's just like a soft one, and I do believe that I will get to Karenina soon. Okay, so Julie asked, samples, yay or nay? I am a pro sample person. Actually, I love samples. Ritter Buller talked about how samples don't really count as DNFs if you start a sample and then decide the book is not for you. I feel exactly the same way. I really count a DNF as like I started it in earnest, and then I stopped reading the book. And I love Kindle samples because it really gives me a flavor for the writing and for the plot and the storyline. And if I don't like the sample, then I don't buy the book. And it's just such a wonder. I love samples. I think that those are fantastic. And probably a lot of those 122 books that I mentioned on my Kindle are samples that I downloaded. And then periodically I clean up all of my samples. Okay, do you even remember the oldest book you have on your on your Kindle? Languishing, that's languishing there unread. So I don't have any except for Anna Karenina. That's the only book that I have unread that I purchase on my Kindle. Now my husband has a couple of books purchased on there that he hasn't read, but that's him and his relationship with his Kindle. Bright and Shiny, what is your most recent book? So my most recent book is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, and I'm about to purchase Robert K. Massie's Catherine the Great because I am loving reading that on my Kindle. The book that I bought for Robert K. Massie is this big chunky paperback, and on the one hand I don't mind reading a big chunky paperback, but I noticed that I wanted to read Massie's book at night when I'm all curled up and snuggled, and I didn't want to read the paperback. So I downloaded the sample, and I'm still working my way through it, and I'm loving this experience with the Kindle and Robert K. Massie's writing. So that will be my next purchase on the Kindle, most likely. Okay, fess up. How quickly do you read books after downloading them? I read them pretty immediately. They end up becoming my nighttime books, and I will spend the next couple of weeks reading them. Often if they're my true nighttime book, it will take me about a month to read because I'm only reading it for the last 15 minutes. But for example, like Robert K. Massie's book, I'm gonna read this morning because I'm excited to get to it. So that kind of thing. It just depends on what I'm reading it for. My nighttime book tends to be light and easy to read, where I don't mind if I fall asleep. So that would be like A Man Called Ove was the last one that I read that was really, truly quite like that. Do you keep a book, so let's see, keepers, do you keep a book on your Kindle after reading it? And if you enjoy it, or are you in a mind of buying a physical copy of it? I don't typically keep two copies. Some books I do, but most books I don't. I'm just okay with having the Kindle version. The book is there. Although lately I've been thinking about how much I really enjoy having the physical book around to look at it and remind me of how I feel about the story. But, you know, I don't mind. I give a lot of my books away anyways, and I'm okay with that. Subs. Do you use a subscription service? No, I don't have a subscription service for my Kindle. I thought about Kindle Unlimited, but the way that I have my relationship with my Kindle right now is that I buy a book and I read it. And I like that healthy relationship with my Kindle. I don't go crazy and buy a bunch of books in my Kindle. I don't typically buy books that I'm not interested in reading. Like, I buy a book and I read it, and I really enjoy that sort of controlled and tame relationship that I have with my Kindle. Go forth and multiply. Other places you read your Kindle and ebooks on. Oh, so occasionally I'll read it on my phone. Very occasionally I'll read it on my iPad, like from the Kindle app, but most of the time I just read it from my Kindle, and I carry my Kindle around. Lucky dip. Close your eyes. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Close your eyes and then pick out a book. I'm not going to do that. Talk about your habit. Don't be shy. So I'm going to talk about, I'm only kind of going through these like based on the ones that I wanted to talk about and explore, but you can see all of her questions down below. They're all wonderful. Oh, my camera's about to die, so give me 1 second. All right, Julie's last question, which is so sweet, is, or silly, but it says, don't be shy. Do you have any suspicious books on your Kindle that you do not want people to see you reading? If so, and if so, use the Kindle to read it on because you want to hide the cover. So it's like a confessional, basically. So do I have any suspicious books on my Kindle? Yes, I do. I have some books with a little bit of spice in them it's not really about hiding them because I wouldn't read those spicy books in person. It's about not wanting to buy them or being really in the mood to read a spicy book and then not wanting to wait for it to be mailed to me and then read it from there. But it's not really about the embarrassment of having it on my shelves or anything like that, or reading it in public, though most of the time I'm at home, so I read a lot of books at home. Mostly it's just about the availability. So yeah, so I am shy and I'm not going to share the titles. But yeah, so that is really all about my Kindle. I love my Kindle. Would it be the only device that I use, or would I stop buying paper books just to read on my Kindle? Absolutely not. I really love paper books. I love the physical object and the memories that they bring forth of the stories that they've read, and in the time of my life when I have read them. When I just see the titles on my Kindle, it doesn't evoke that same experience. However, my Kindle is part of my routine. It's a part of my evening routine. Right before I fall asleep, I always read. It's really like my sleep routine. And that's really, really important to me, partly because sleep is really important to me, and I've had a very tumultuous relationship with my sleep and sleeping schedule. And the other thing is that, you know, it's just a lovely habit to be in, because sometimes, as my dad would say, sometimes you read a few sentences and then fall asleep, and sometimes you really get into the book and you actually like start to read it in earnest, and that's a lovely experience as well. So I would never give up my Kindle. But I also wouldn't give up the paper book as well. I could imagine that if I was a book critic, or if I was somebody who was a bit of more of a voracious reader than I was, then the Kindle would even be a better tool, because you can search, like actually type in and search keywords, and you can search your shelves versus getting up and looking through your shelves. But right now my library isn't that big, and so I don't have that problem. I'm not losing books amid the shuffle. So yeah, again, it's a mixed thing. I do prefer to read the physical book, but then there are times where like Catherine the Great, I'm having an incredible experience on my Kindle and I'm really enjoying it. So, you know, a mixed review on my Kindle. Oh, and just so you know, the Kindle Oasis has these buttons where you can flip the pages. I really love that. I like being able to navigate with a physical button, and that is truly, truly wonderful. But otherwise, the Kindle Oasis versus the Kindle Paperwhite, there's hardly any difference, except for the Kindle Oasis, I believe, has a slightly smarter processing system in it. It's a faster processing system. But to me, that's neither here nor there, because once I get the book downloaded, I'm good to go. But really, that was it. So I hope you enjoy this. Julie, thank you for the wonderful tag. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions. Some of them I really just didn't have any answers for. And that is it. So thank you all for watching. Do you have a Kindle? Do you like your Kindle? Tell me about your relationship with your Kindle. Oh, and I mentioned earlier, I'll close with this, that Kindle, in some ways, it really is magic, because any book that I want, it appears. I mentioned that in a tag once, and I wanted to say that, like, there is something very, very magical about desiring to read a book and downloading a sample and being able to read it right then and there without having to wait for the library, without having to get in your car to go somewhere. It's actually right there. There's something really, really magical. I know it's modern, but it truly feels like magic. And I think that's a good note to close on. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to my rambles and for hanging out with my sweet puppy and me. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you all just have the most wonderful day. Okay, bye guys.